right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is November 6th, 2025. Thank you so much for joining me, folks, to discover the truth beneath the surface. As always, I really do appreciate everybody out there taking the time to listen. And tonight it is my pleasure to welcome back one of my good friends who just so happens to be one of the most respected voices in our movement, the great Lieutenant Colonel Bosi, for what I'm sure will be an interesting discussion. It always is. This is one of my favorite interviews. It's always great to have you back, Rick. How you been doing?
Mate, always a pleasure to see your smiling face. Now, it's good to be back. It's been too long between drinks, and thanks for that lovely introduction. But you must have, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just another face on the screen, and we're all doing our best to share the news with people. I guess I've been like this all my life, and so one of my superiors thought I was a monumental pain in the backside instead of being what he's told. So I'm just me, and if we're doing some good, then that's a good thing.
Well, we certainly are, and when we get together, it's always a memorable discussion. We, like you said, we can look at the macro view, and then we can drill right down into the specific issues and everything in between. And it's always a free-flowing, informative discussion for the audience. So I appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. Everybody out there is anxious to hear your perspective on the progress of this operation. And indeed, that's going to be our primary focus tonight. But in order to kick things off, as I'm more prone to doing lately, I'm going to give you the floor and just sort of have you paint a picture of the 40,000-foot view as you see it, just to kind of set the table. Where do we find ourselves at this stage of the operation? Here we are, the beginning of November, towards the end of 2025. Where do you see things? How do you see things on the grand scale, on the macro view? And then we can dive into some more specific questions.
Yeah, well, whenever you look at an area of operations, one of the things you must do, because we have to live within its constraints, is the geography, the terrain, the weather, the season. Does that make sense? Like, you're going to invade Russia, don't do it in winter. It's a bad move. It's been tried twice and didn't work out either time. And so before we look at the players, let's look at the terrain, the weather, the season. Where are we? We're coming up to the end of 2025, and I don't know where the year went, mate. I don't know what it's been like for you, but it has just flown by for us. We just can't believe so much as time has passed. But the key point is we're coming up to January 1st. That's an important moment in people's minds. It's the beginning of a new year, and so psychologically people are prepared for something new. And the next point is 4 July 2026, 250th anniversary. And so what we all have to realize is that within that time parameter, a lot's got to happen. A lot has got to happen because the White Hats will want to make sure that as much unpleasantness is taken care of well before July 4, 2026, if that makes sense. So you look back and go, okay, so we got 4th of July. What's going to happen and when? So that's the perspective that I look at this. So that's the frame, I guess. And so when I see what's going to be happening, the 40,000-foot view, we know that a lot's coming out a lot faster, and faster than you actually keep up, because I'll prepare my notes for an interview, and then within 48 hours, that's old news, and the new news has got to be, I've got to adapt everything at the last minute, which is actually very encouraging, because this slow grind that we've been going through for so many years now is without a doubt has ended some time ago. And if people are still saying, when is the reveal going to happen? They're not paying attention. They're really not, because so much is happening so quickly. So in the next, I guess, 4 to 8 weeks coming up to the end of the year, there's going to be, the reveals will continue. Massive disappointment with the people. The people will be massively disappointed with their heroes, whether it's a sport, the politicians, the religious leaders. There's going to be a lot coming out that's going to cause a lot of concern with them, and that'll destabilize them. Pain is coming. Pain, chaos, and fear. I said it the other night. Pain, chaos, and fear. And then that's just got to happen, because what was required of the people didn't happen. And I made this very clear to the Australians the other night on my green room, my weekly green room, which is basically you didn't do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. I remember talking to a crowd of 200,000 in Martin Place in Sydney. Great rally, great people. I said, "Cool down, bring the system to a halt. Withdraw your consent, cut off the funds, take long service leave, take whatever it is, but let's bring it to a halt." They all cheered and went straight back to work and kept the money flowing. And so they didn't do what they were supposed to do, but that's just everybody, not just Australia. And so because we didn't do what we're supposed to do, now the pain comes. And they said, well, what do we do? And I said, exactly what we've been saying for years: withdraw consent, stop playing the game. But unfortunately, there is after the demoralization process of many decades, and on top of that, the injections, the COVID injections, and the 5G, which is actually affecting people's psychology. This is obvious. There's plenty of evidence of that. They're even less likely to take action now. And so people are more worried about the cash in the bank. They're more worried about their mortgage payment than whether their son needs a penis or not, or whether their daughter's going to die of myocarditis with a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years. You know, it is the animals look after their young better than the human population of Earth has done in the last few years. And I said, there are explanations, and I get that. But goodness me, it's not, let's say, it's not the people's fault, but it's their responsibility, and they haven't stepped up with that responsibility. So now the pain comes. There's going to be more and more and more. Now, how's that pain going to come to us? Well, we'll talk about the details shortly. But Mandami in New York, are you kidding? Oh, man.
I got a whole segment planned on that one. Yeah, that's
yeah. But that's I won't dive into it, but because I've got a few things on him as well. But the pain's coming. Mandami in New York, the elections across the US, obvious fraud. Blind Freddie could actually see it. So all these things are coming, and so it's the same theme of they have to be shown because they haven't listened. They can't be told, so they have to be shown. So now we're going to see it, and we and then the globe, we're all going to feel it quite acutely. So it's going to get bad, and then worse, and then intolerable until everybody's attention is focused on what's got to be done. So that's what's happening soon. That's the biggest of big views. And as I said, we can dive down into some specifics shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Wonderful way to start off. So you mentioned you were kind of breaking up a little bit, and I heard you mention July of 2026 as being an important marker. And I didn't quite catch the full context of that. Just so folks know, we're live and everybody knows Rick's all the way in Oz in Australia. So we're doing the best we can to keep this connection going here. There might be a little bit, there might be some moments where it gets a little bit tough to get the whole meaning, the whole picture of what he's saying. So I'll kind of circle back if that happens. But what was it that you were saying about July of 26 as being a very important marker in your mind, or a sort of looking off into the future? What was that? I didn't quite catch the whole context there.
Okay, and comms will be a bit dodgy because they shut me down quite regularly here in Australia, quite specifically. So I'll slow down. Yeah, I don't know. So I'll slow down, and if I do have to repeat, just ask me to go again. So what happens is this: you've got 4 July 2026. Now we know that DJ Tech knows how to run a show, right? And this is a show, and you can't have the 250th anniversary of the United States of America as anything other than an unmitigated success. It is just brilliant. It is full of joy and happiness. It is relief. You're still around after 250 years, which over the course of history, 250 years is roughly how long civilizations last. So you can go back to any of them. Even the Roman Empire went for much longer. It went through phases of about 250 years. The Republic was different to the emperors, was different to the decline at the end, okay? And so it's actually, historically, it's fantastic that the US is still here 250 years later. It should have been gone, but it's not. And there's no way they will allow this anniversary to pass without clearing as much of the pain and misery out of the system as possible. So that's why that marker is important between January 1st and July 4. There's going to be a lot of pain early in the quarter 1, quarter 2, but coming to end of the begin as we approach quarter 3, that's July, most of the pain will be gone, and people can actually feel the relief and celebrate, quite honestly, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
Well, that is a wonderful way to start out the interview, and I'm sure that a lot of folks, that's music to my ears. I can only imagine the audience listening out there is in full agreement. So why don't we dive in a little bit? And of course, you just mentioned the election, and that really was the first topic that I wanted to get into. Now, as you know, Q told us that by the time all of this is over, that the Democratic Party will cease to exist, right? And I think it's safe to assume that very few people out there in the audience and basically in our movement expected that Republicans were going to take such a beating on an election day in November of 2025, especially given the fact that even CNN is reporting that approval ratings for the left, for the Democrats, have been in a downward spiral, basically, swirling around the toilet right now. So it kind of took a lot of folks off guard. And consequently, many people were disheartened, to say the least, about what transpired, particularly, of course, in New York City. And once again, it raises the question, the results raise the question about election fraud being alive and well, even at this stage of the game. And even as us Anons continue to recognize these events as a scripted movie, I think you would probably agree that these questions persist. I mean, do we really think that he got 50% of the vote? Now, it's tough to say definitively. I mean, it's possible, which let's just look at both sides. If he did get 50% of the vote, that would validate the argument that the people still need to go through this experience in order to awaken to the truth, right? But on the other hand, it's also possible that the result that we were given was predetermined by the White Hats in order to function as a red pill moment for all the normies out there. And I mean, clearly this individual has garnered a pretty large base. This Mamdani guy has garnered a large base of support for his overtly communist policies. But either way, no matter how you look at it, yesterday there was I think it was a 9-year delta. It was drop 112 in 2017. So this was very, very early on, November 5th of 2017, where Q wrote, "Elections no longer matter at this stage." Now, why? Because we're under continuity of government. At least we've been under continuity of government, at least in some form, since Trump won back in 2016. Now, ultimately, I believe that Mamdani is central casting. We hear Trump saying central casting over and over and over and over again, and that this is all part of the operation to do exactly what I just described by way of continuing to show the people the real agenda of the deep state through a simulation, which we refer to as the movie. And to evidence that, we saw, I don't know if you caught this, Rick, but at Mamdani's victory celebration, right up on the big screen projected, it said, "Trump is your president." Like, I mean, to me, that was absolutely priceless. And then no sooner did he declare victory, he put out a viral video that's asking all of his constituents to send him money to fund this agenda for all of this free stuff. So, it's underscoring this basic principle, of course, that nothing is free and that socialist policies always fail for the same reasons. And so, while I can relate to some of the frustration that folks are expressing within our community, that this drama is continuing to play out. I mean, I get it. I'm just like everybody else, just like you, Rick. We all want this to be over as soon as possible. And certainly looking into next year with what you just said to start off the interview gives us a lot of hope that we're rapidly progressing toward the climax of the movie. But a lot of folks are, like I mentioned, they were deeply upset by this, because even after 4 years of a fake presidency, at a time when most of us expected that we would be reveling in all of the disclosure and all of the public arrests that we thought would have occurred by now. I mean, I understand where people are coming from, but I continue to remind everybody out there in my audience that the counterinsurgency operation that began during Trump's first term, that we were just reminded of by that delta that I just read off, is clearly ongoing. And that we need to continue to hold the line while all of this plays out, regardless of how long it takes. I keep telling everybody, when people ask me different forms of the question, when do you think it's going to be over? My response is always, it's going to be over when it's over. And this is God's timeline. And our job is to continually track what I refer to as the trajectory of the operation and recognize that we remain on course, that we're steadily progressing toward victory. And that's ultimately going to be the theme of tonight's show. So with that said, why don't you dive in a little bit? I know you had maybe a slide, I think, or something you wanted to share about, was it on this segment for the election, or were we going to wait to the other segment? I couldn't remember.
Oh, no, that's okay. Let's go to them now, because it'll give your audience a prism through which you can view all the events. So let's get it up first. And as we talk through it, people will realize there's been an insurgency, a counterinsurgency, and a reveal all operating simultaneously. It's been quite a complex, and this is just one complex operation. And this is just one aspect of a incredibly, incomprehensibly complex op. So let me just very quickly see if I can get this up without having too many dramas. Just bear with me for half a second, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so let's. There we go. Share screen. Oh, da 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 da. There we
Sometimes
go.
it takes a minute for it to pop up, but
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is clearly, I mean, in my view, this is a show. This is all part of the show that we're watching, and they're making it pretty obvious. But let's go ahead and let's go ahead and go through this.
Okay, so you've got the screen in front of you, making sense of what you see.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, let's go through it one by one. Now, this is going to be old news for some and brand new for others. And I'm not going to give you a sort of a 4-year course in what we're talking about, but the people need to know, as I said, the prism through which they've got to observe these issues. So the war for the world is being fought in many ways. No kidding. We know that. One perspective, okay? And we're talking about unconventional warfare. And people have heard that term many times. They've heard irregular warfare, psychological operations, and it's a mishmash to non-military types, but these are quite formally defined and executed. So I can't take you through that, but you've got to look at this through the unconventional warfare prism, and I'll take you through that shortly. But let's have a look at this. What is UW? It's support to a resistance movement. That's what UW is. It's support to a resistance movement. Historically, and most often in the US experience, let's say, the US has supported a semi-organized, militarized, irregular force known in doctrine as a guerrilla force, as an insurgency. So you've got a country, and you've got a bad government, and you've got some good people trying to take over control of the country to throw out the bad guys and put the good guys in. And so you've got this insurgency, a guerrilla force is doing that. And that's all it is. US support for the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan 2001 is the most recent successful example, let's say. Now, the Black Hats, what have they been doing? They employed against the US and the world. They actually had an unconventional war, and they employed that against us. And I'll break it down for you, but just keep that in the back of your head. The White Hats, and here's where it gets a little bit complex, and that why it takes so long. The White Hats have employed it against the Black Hats. So they've had an insurgency against the Americans, and then the White Hats have done a counterinsurgency against the Black Hats while simultaneously exposing Black Hat activity to the civilian population. And this is just a tiny glimpse of the complexity. But that's an overview of what's been going on. Now we're going to dive into some detail. If I lose you here, and I might, and that's okay, don't worry about it. Let it wash over. You can get the source document. It's available online. It's the Pocket Guide to Unconventional Warfare. And if you're interested, you can read through it in the sense that it'll help you understand what you're watching. Now, a couple of definitions. Definitions are extremely important when you're talking military ops. That's why I love the military. Everything's defined. Everything has its place. It might be wrong, at least know where you stand. So Special Operation Forces operational modes. SOF can conduct activities in different operational modes: overt, low visibility, clandestine, and covert. All very different, folks, and we're going to go through the definitions. So while you watch what the White Hats are doing, Black Hats are doing, you'll say, oh, okay, I know where this fits in. So overt, that's both the activity and the sponsor are acknowledged. So this is an overt op. The teams go in, the cameras are there, they're filming the lads kicking in the doors and taking down the bad guys. That's an overt operation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Low visibility.
Right. Mm-hmm.
An activity where the activity and or the sponsor may preclude plausible deniability by the sponsor. So you won't be allowed to, if it comes out, you won't be allowed to deny it. It's pretty obvious who did it and what was done. That's a low visibility op, but you want to make sure you keep it as low as possible. Covert operation, an activity that is planned and executed to conceal the identity of or permit plausible deniability by the sponsor. So the activity might be obvious, something's occurred, a fuel dump has gone up or an election's been frauded, but you're not exactly sure who did it, and plausible deniability. That's covert. And finally, you got clandestine, an activity sponsored or conducted in such a way for the secrecy of or concealment of both the operation and the sponsor. So nobody knows it's occurred, and therefore there's no identity to the sponsor. And that might be, say, initially the programming of, I don't know, Dominion voting machines to do things that you're doing. At the time, nobody knew it had happened, and nobody knew it, and that's a clandestine operation. So that's the first thing you got to look at. Now, you want to jump in quickly before I do the last slide, Ben? Are you good?
No, I'm good. I'm just. No, I'm good.
Okay, let's go. So now here's a pyramid of activities, and I'll go through slowly for you. And this is, I guess, a sequence of events if you're running an insurgency against a country. Although, as I said, you've got the black hats employing it, then you've got the white hats doing a counterinsurgency against the black hats. It's quite amusing. So let's just go through it one by one. And then as I describe each of these levels, I'll read it out to you because it's hard to read for yourself. I'll read it out to you. Excuse me. You'll start to see, okay, I see what they're doing now. So the first one is dissatisfaction with political, economic, social, administrative, and or other conditions, national aspirations, or ideological and other changes. Think Barack Obama saying we're going to change America. Oops. Next. The creation of atmosphere of wider discontent through propagandized political and psychological effort, in government, police, and military authorities. Again, the mainstream media has been key in delivering this atmosphere of discontent. For goodness sake, we'll get there. Assassination, forming favorable public opinion, advocating national cause, creation of distrust of established institutions. Oh, for the love of God, get there. Increased agitation, unrest, and disaffection, infiltration of administration, police and military, and national organizations, and slowdowns and strikes. And so this has been happening over many decades, this particular phase, infiltrating the military, the security agencies, etc., to the point where they are running the show. Now, this goes way back in history. Infiltration of foreign agents and agitators and foreign propaganda material, money, weapons, and equipment. And you can include the cartels, which are not so much a drug organization. They're designed to destabilize and destroy the fabric of American society. Mm-hmm. Recruitment of like-minded individuals and others, indoctrination and use of these for organizational purposes. And so you've got all these fake organizations being established with lovely names that sound like they're doing good things, but in reality, they're a front. And again, you can think of any number of fronts out there to continue this infiltration and internal destruction of the US.
Yeah, I'd put the end. I'd put the end.
Say again.
I was going to say I would put the NGOs right up at the top of that. Right up at the top of that list.
Absolutely. As you can see, this is already starting to peak. I'm sure, like it is with Patriot here, it's trying to peak. Okay, that's what they're doing. That's that example, and you'll be doing the same. Next, what do we got? Spreading subversive organizations in all sectors of life and a country and a region. So it penetrated at the grassroots level. That's why they had so much success when COVID kicked in, where you've got pastors telling their congregations, get the jab, for example. And that's an excellent example of how deeply they got penetrated. And don't think for a minute that they're not part of the problem. Because as we've said many, many times, every aspect of life on earth has been penetrated over decades and decades. The polity, the bureaucracy, the judiciary, the constabulary, the military, big business, big unions, media, academia, the security agencies, every church, synagogue, lodge, mosque, and temple has been penetrated. They had control of every device on the planet. And so when they said make it happened simultaneously at every level, from the lowest to the highest. Mm-hmm. And this took decades and decades to establish. That's where they were. Establishment of formalized resistance elements, appeal to extraterritorial support infrastructure, Black Lives Matter, the funding for that and the damage they were doing. And just as an example of how the police were actively involved in that, I don't know if people remember how under the control of the police, bricks and rocks were positioned along the protest path, so they had something to throw at the people, at the building, as the Black Lives Matter and other movements ran their protests. And this is all well and truly set up. Next, expansion and coordination of resistance networks. Again, now this is where it expands, let's say, internationally. So you got the Muslim Brotherhood showing their ugly heads, obviously, in the country. Now, this is all clandestine. Again, if you look at the line up the top here, this is overt up here, and this is clandestine. Nobody's supposed to know that it's happening. And secondly, nobody's supposed to know who's responsible. Intensification of propaganda, increase in disaffection, psychological preparation for revolt, overt pressures against government, strikes, riots and disorders, sabotage and terror to demonstrate the weakness of government, in reverse even. For example, Jan 6 was an attempt to, in a reverse way, make that happen. Increased underground activities to demonstrate strength of revolutionary organization, intense sapping of morale of government, administration, police and military, defund. You know, where was this coming from? Negotiation with government representatives to give them preparation for the big move, and then increased violence, terror and sabotage. So this is your classic insurgency and how it's run. Now you can see already by your own experience what's happened here. The Black Hats have been doing this. Now don't worry about the overt part, because that's was going to happen, but it's not going to. That was intended. The Black Hats were going to make sure there was the overt military move to shut down the country. So there you go. That's all I wanted to show you. That's the prism through which you can. That's a prism through which, at least, as I said, it's a bit quick and you won't get it all. That's fine. Your brain can unconsciously absorb 10,000 bits of information a second if it's only getting a couple of hundred. So, having said all of that, having set that stage, we can now dive into issues, and people will see the complexity of this all.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I lost you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, I wasn't sure if you were continuing. We're having a little bit of a tough time with the connection here, but that's okay. So no, that was a fantastic breakdown of how, and a lot of folks don't really talk about this. We often talk about 5th generation warfare, and we talk about this, this clandestine operation that the White Hats are running, but not so often looking at it from the perspective of what the deep state was inflicting upon all of us for such a long time. And before any of us really woke up, we had no idea that this was going on. Certainly we knew that there were some bad actors within the government. We knew that there were some shady things going on, but the degree to which this was organized in that top-down structure and the way that this was being deployed on all of us is something that a lot of folks don't really fully appreciate. And now what we're witnessing is that the good guys, the White Hats, have taken essentially that same model and they flipped it around in that kind of jujitsu move, and they're using it against the enemy, and indeed, to a certain extent, against all the normies out there in order to gradually wake them up. So having laid that out, that paradigm of the way that unconventional warfare works, and specifically the clandestine element, how could we then circle back to the election and apply this result that we just, we're absorbing into the overall picture of what the White Hats are doing? I mean, do you agree in principle that this is all part of the movie? What was your general reaction to what we saw, and what do you think the strategy is behind it?
Sure. Strategy first. Show not tell. They have to show the people exactly what's going on. Okay, let's go down there, because it really shows the depth of control that's going on. You mentioned central casting. Let's talk Mamdani, because he's an excellent example, and it goes back in a way to Islam, to the Saudis and the rest of the Islamic world. It seemed like an unrelated comment, but go way back here. He said, Islam's problem is for you to solve, not ours. Not our problem to solve Islam, that's our problem to solve Islam. Now extract that, or extrapolate that rather, across just about every problem the US has got that isn't the US's problem. So Islam, no. Communism, no. None of this is ever consistent with the United States, ever. And yet now you've got a communist, and you've got Muslims taking over your country. And you've got Muslims now saying that previously to participate in an election was haram, but now it is the jihad. You must vote and you must take over. We are now fighting with ballots, not bullets, to use their expression. What's going on here? These guys, it looks like, my God, they've taken over. We're about to lose the war. But it's all central casting. They're all doing DJT's bidding. Now, for those of us who are aware, I got to sort of smile and go, oh, this is... To think that Mandami is a puppet on a string for us is funny, but there's they've yet to get it. They're still sitting there waiting for everything to be better, and they don't have to do anything. I mean, I can't believe that, what is it, the numbers was 97% or something of women voted for Mandami. Really? And that he won New York. Really? With all the get out of here, forget about it types. These people don't shift. So what's happening? So I think this is a white hat move. I think it's central casting. This is for people to really start losing it. They understand, and they're going to have to feel it. New York's not going to just cruise past. Bad things are going to start happening because they have to see exactly what the black hats intended. The people have to, from their experience, what the black hats have intended and what the white hats are going to prevent from happening long term. Okay, and so that's the first step. What's the strategy? You got to show them. Not enough people have got there yet. The people are still just sitting there waiting. They're going to work, paying their taxes, waiting for somebody to come and save them. And this might sound insulting, but when it's got to be said, and I said it the other night to the Australians, so to your American audience, don't be offended. But Australia, and enough Americans are still in this. They're like in an old folks' home, waiting to be woken up, waiting to be taken to the toilet, waiting to be taken to breakfast, waiting to go to the rec room, waiting to watch some TV, waiting for visitors, then waiting to go to the toilet, then waiting for dinner, lunch, and then waiting for TV, and then wait. And they're just waiting. We can no longer wait because the cost of waiting has been the destruction of our civilizations, all the way down to the mutilation of our children. At what point does sane and wholesome language go out the window and somebody thump the table with a fist and say, that's enough? And not enough people have got this. So first question, what's the strategy? The strategy is the people have to feel the pain. They've got to feel the pain, not because anybody's cruel, because they have not earned this yet. And this is a key issue. We, the people of the planet, a lot of us have. Don't get me wrong. We've been working for years for this, but the great unwashed out there are still waiting for somebody to take them to the toilet, take them to lunch, take them to the visitors, take them to bed. They're waiting for this, they're waiting for that, and they're waiting to die. And so, no, central casting. So it's not just Mandami, but you can talk about it because what are they seeing? They're seeing a communist now running New York. The center of capitalism, the greatest city on the planet. Think about it. It's a machine that nobody can control, and yet a communist
Yep.
funded by Soros with obvious vote fraud, with non-stop attacks on the Christian foundations. You don't have to be a Christian to value the Christian foundations. Make that clear, guys. But if you've got a problem with that term, go live in an Islamic country for, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. I mean it. Go live in a Hindu country 2, 3, 4, 5 months. You'll come back and you will hug the streets of New York.
Yeah.
You'll kiss the ground and say, never change. I'll never leave you. Please don't leave me again, because we're all too comfortable. And so Mandami's a good example of that. He's central casting, and it's an example. And pain is coming. It really is. And people will realize, okay, this is serious. They're going to be seriously disappointed with the system. They're going to be seriously disappointed with voter fraud. And let me just talk about voter fraud for a second here, because again, people don't realize their vote is their most valuable possession, other than their family. Nothing matters more than their vote, and it's more than their housing portfolio or their stockpile of gold and silver, because that vote is so precious because it dictates to the future of the country. But in our country, for example, the ballots, they're just printed off, and you can get a photocopy and print off as many as you like and tick them as many as you like and put them in a box, and there's no control over the transport of the votes. And we've contested 6 elections, both at the state and the federal level here in Australia, and we've got tons of evidence. We've got videos, our people videoing boxes of ballots being taken out of the booths illegally in unmarked, unsecured private vehicles, not knowing where they've gone, and then the results match. So again, the people have to realise, yes, it's vote fraud. It's obvious vote fraud, but what are you going to do about it? Now, in this country, what we're going to do, if we have the slightest influence on the future, which I hope we do, is system for voting. You get a registered numbered document. It's a secure document, like with classified information. Each document is numbered and it's recorded, and its whereabouts is tracked, right? That's what the vote should be. So you get your vote, and it's got 3 sheets of paper. It's got 3 different colors. One's for you to mark. You mark it on, and you take that off. That's yours to keep. So you've got a record of how you individually voted, and it's got a number. Your name. Your name's not connected to the number, so you can't track who voted for whom. But you've got ballot 13711. Okay, and it says you've got that. You stick it in your pocket, and you're good to go. The second one goes into the thing that counts it immediately, so you get instant results.
Right.
And then you got a third copy that goes into a separate container for recounts to validate what's going on. But here's the good news: as the votes are coming in, you can see it live on the screen, and you can check your number. You go online, you go 137. Yes, I voted for Bosi. Good for me. My vote counted. So if there's any discrepancy, immediately it's seen. So there are technical solutions to this problem, which apparently is so insurmountable according to the morons that run the electoral system. It's not. It's very simple. And so this is the sort of thing that people should be demanding. In our country, for example, going back 100 years, they were talking about vote fraud. And they were claiming there has been an honest election in Australia over 100 years. Seriously, this has been an issue for years.
Yep.
So people have to get angry. People have to stop worrying about the football results and understand, why is my vote not counting? Why can I not trust the electoral system? They literally have to get involved. Last line on that, but I'll give you a chance to jump in. At our dinner table when we were children, we only spoke politics and religion because they're the only 2 important things that really need to be discussed. I mean, you can talk about the football, 10 minutes, that's done. Memorizing the names and the number of touchdowns somebody's scored or yards have thrown, it's too small a thing to live your life for. And people used to hear, don't talk religion and politics, and we were taught to talk religion and politics and understand your place on the planet. So people have to get into this stuff in a very real and immediate way. If we don't, we're in trouble, and the majority don't, and that's why the pain is coming.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. And honestly, looking back on the previous administration of fake Biden, a lot of us, including myself, were anticipating that pain that you're talking about, which is necessary, was going to come during that 4-year period. And I suppose you could say to a certain degree that was true. But looking back on it, I think most of the pain was probably experienced by all of us as we were watching this, this fiasco go on, and all the normies just, seem to be pretty much, unaffected by it for the most part. I mean, I happen to I live in Massachusetts, which is one of the most libtarded areas. I mean, it's not too different from New York or California. And I look around and I still see people who have absolutely showing zero signs of any kind of questioning, waking up, shifting in their, in terms of their priorities. None of that has happened. And, so I anticipated that during the Biden years, that the plan was going to be that they were going to essentially let this buffoon steer the country into the ground. And just at the right moment, the White Hats were going to come in and, pull back on the controls and steer us out of harm's way. But I think that's kind of where we're at now, because we went through this entire 4-year period. Indeed, a lot of people did wake up, don't get me wrong, but there still are an enormous amount of people out there who, as you correctly pointed out, they're just so focused on basically everything that doesn't matter and nothing that does. And with that ideology, with that frame of, with that frame of mind, basically you're going to get a large contingent of the voting bloc to actually support a guy like this. Now, I think he's central casting. Whether or not he was actually, whether or not it was a straight up vote and he actually won legitimately, I'm not really sure how I feel about that, because there's a part of me that thinks, well, this is all central casting. It's a white hat production. He's a plant, and so therefore they just put him in there to kind of prove a point. But then there's another part of me that thinks there's a possibility that many people actually supported voting in an actual communist in New York City. So I mean, we don't know definitively the answer one way or another, but I agree with you. I think that what you said about, if you don't like the way of life that we have here, you should go and live in an Islamic country, a Hindu country for a few months, and then you'll come back and you'll be kissing the ground. I think that is essentially what we're going to see play out in New York City, as this guy completely destroys everything, or at least they're going to create the optics of that. We're already seeing videos of Muslims climbing up on flagpoles and tearing down American flags, massive hordes of them in Times Square, in a call to prayer. And obviously New York has been one of the most dangerous places for a while now. Certainly during the past 4 years, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now that they have a Muslim leader, you can only imagine what those optics are going to look like moving forward. So I agree with you. I think in the very short term, he doesn't actually take power until, I think, January 1st. But I agree with what you said in the beginning, that the first part of 2026 is going to get very, very bumpy. And we're going to see some things that even up until this point, we haven't seen, and it's going to be pretty wild ride. So yeah, I agree with you. This is all central casting, and ultimately, like I said, I feel the sense of frustration that a lot of people share, that we had anticipated that we would be at a different phase of the operation by now. But if we're really being honest, we hadn't really gone through. I mean, we've all suffered because we know the truth, and we are just waiting for everything to come out. All the things that we know, we want all of that to be exposed. So, and in the meantime, of course, a lot of folks out there, let's just be honest, they're struggling. I remember one of the conversations that you and I had not too long ago, when we were talking about, what you anticipated happening down the road, is that, when Trump came into office, this might have actually been a year ago. Like when Trump comes into office, what do you anticipate is going to happen in the beginning? And you had said that he's going to make some, pretty dramatic moves to improve quality of life for people out there who are suffering. And I think that's happened to an extent, but there's also quite a bit of folks out there who are really struggling right now. And, so I understand their perspective, but we also have to remember that we're in the middle of the most epic battle of good versus evil. We're in the middle of a spiritual war right now, and it's not over yet. I mean, and we're going to get into this a little bit later in the show. We're going to talk about Venezuela, and you and I both agree that there is the way that this battle plan has been structured is that the White Hats, they took out all the top tiers of the cabal first, and then they moved their way systematically down to the second tier. So all of the leadership is gone. They're all under White Hat control, or they're under submission, or they've been taken off the chessboard one way or another. But there still is a very active cleanup operation that's going on, as well as all of this is continuing to play out. So that's the way I see it. We're continuing this scripted movie, but there also is a very real aspect, a real element to it as well. I like to call it the hybrid of being a scripted movie, but also some real kinetic events playing out. Anything you wanted to add to that, Rick? Did I lose you? Oh, it looks like you're muted.
Let's try again. No, we're good. We're good. What people have to bear in mind when they say, well, that's not fair, we're good, let's just get on with it. You can't, because the people have to wake up. That's now the center of gravity.
Right.
I've spoken about the importance of the center of gravity before. Yes, most of the senior leadership of the Black Hats is gone. We got it. In fact, the worst of the worst went some years ago. There are exactly right. The secret societies, the senior leadership of that's gone, but the lower ones have been just doing what they always do. What has changed is this: they are no longer getting directions from the higher ups.
Right.
And worse for them, good for us, is they're now asking questions like, they can't be, what they're saying about us can't be true. This is a benevolent society. We're just gentlemen, business people that look after each other, and we're moral, and we pray to our goat, and it's all good. But the lower ones who have never done anything bad and just thought they were doing the right thing, they are now starting to discuss the truth amongst themselves. But that's only part of the battle. They have to turn around and be as revolted with their organization as we are. They're not there yet. They're going to say, oh, well, okay, we'll get rid of the bad guys and we'll keep doing our meetings and riding our goats. No, see, that's not good enough. The people have to wake up. Everybody, to the extent possible, have to wake up. Now, we know that not everybody will. We get that. We understand that. And these ones that are incapable. But it's not enough to say, oh, okay, we saw some bad things, but we'll just continue on our path. We'll get rid of the bad ones. No, the foundations are rotten. The foundations have been putrefied. Now, there's an interesting question. I was working on this the other day. Your founding fathers had a question, and I never understood why until just recently. They said, should we have an agrarian economy or an industrial economy? And I thought, okay, they're not dumb people. I don't understand the question. I've got a problem here. Now, what's that got to do with what we're talking about? Everything. Because in an agrarian society, and I'm not suggesting we go back to tilling with hoes and, planting seeds by hand. I don't mean that. What I mean is a dispersed across the entire country in smaller townships to make living in a small town so attractive, so desirable that people want to be there. Why is that important? Because when you're in a small town, everybody knows you, and there's this moral imperative to keep your nose clean because anonymity is almost impossible. You get to a big city, you can be as anonymous as you like, and you can do and say the worst things ever. In a small town, you more find the love of your life and realize that it's important that we grow a big family. In the big city, you can screw yourself stupid until you've got so many venereal diseases that nobody wants to touch you. And so there is an active disadvantage to the industrialized, as we know it today, cities and the depopulated rural centers. And so if we want, one of the issues here, if we really want to prevent this ever happening again, this is one of our policies, for example, where we're going to repopulate the rural areas. We're going to build the infrastructure. We're going to build the schools, the ports, the airports, the roads, the bridges, provide the online government assistance for homeschoolers, all that sort of thing. And so we've got vibrant rural communities, and they're still connected to the internet. Don't get me wrong. We're not talking about going back to the Middle Ages, right?
Right.
But the community, the communities are smaller and tighter, and they can have their football team, and they can. In fact, there's a football team in New South. Get this: the three towns couldn't muster a team between them, so they came together. They couldn't muster a team individually, so these three towns came together, and it's called the Ganmain, the Grong Grong Ganmain. Wait a minute. Grong Grong Man. It's the funniest collection of names. But these three towns, that's it. The Ganmain Grong Grong Madong Football Club, and they love their Ganmain Grong Grong Madong Football Club, and they go play everybody else. Why is this important? Because the law, the source of law is the people, and the people have to be as close to the law as possible. So certainly in our model, what we're going to do is we're going to lean heavily on the US model, but we're going to be a little different. We're going to push as much law down to the counties as possible, maximum law at the county level. State law looks after state, federal looks after federal, but there's none of this overreach from above. So you've got this distant government in the background making your life miserable. And so what's necessary for this to happen, we need to revitalize a populated rural area, which now will take all the benefits of an agrarian society where monogamy, marriage, family, self-reliance, sovereignty, all of these real life and death issues for a nation are being experienced at the family, the town level. And that is a precursor for preventing this ever happening again. If we just continue doing what we're doing, everyone's cities of 10, 15, 20 million. Forget it. We'll be back in a second. Why? Because the morality changes in a big city as it does to a small town. There are real advantages to this. And so we've got to do the best of both worlds. If we want to prevent this happening again, the normies have to wake up, or as Derek Johnson calls them, the target audience needs to realize that no, this cannot continue. Mm-hmm. It cannot continue. We must fundamentally, what's the right word? Rediscover what it is to be a good, solid Christian nation. And the practical way of achieving that is, again, this revitalized rural area, small towns. Look, we're even going to, my plan is this, even with our defense forces. Now, it makes sense, for example, to brigade all your battalion, like 3 battalions and your artillery and your into one brigade base. That makes a lot of sense. It's much cheaper, it's much more effective, blah, blah, blah. No, not us. We're going to break it back down again. And we're going to have, say, an infantry battalion base. So we have the 1st 15th brackets, Gan Main, close brackets, infantry battalion. And so Gan Main gets behind its battalion. There's a connection to the community. They feel like this is their home. Now, is it going to cost more? Absolutely. But why should the government be paying money in gross, obscene amounts to corporations to provide what the military can provide for itself? So we're going to have our own butchers, our own carpenters, our own electricians manning the facilities, everything. So we get more trade people out there. And so the towns start to build. They start to become genuine self-reliant. And that self-reliant is accompanied by this sense of, hang on, this is our town. You don't mess with it. In our case, Canberra, or in your case, Washington. This is our county. This is our town. You leave us alone. We're doing good down here. And so we get this genuine ability to have the benefits of the agrarian society without the downsides of the industrialized society. That foundation, get back to the point, I'm a bit long-winded, that has to happen to prevent this happening again. And we can't have a bunch of normies that think the biggest achievement is paying their mortgage and living in an overpriced box in a city. That's the sort of fundamental change at an infrastructure level and population distribution that has to take place. And that won't happen until the normies get the pain of having their heads up their backside, so to speak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There has to be a fundamental change that really comes from within each and every person. And it's not only just about waking everybody up to what's going on, but it's also having that then result in a spiritual change inside of every person. And this is why I've always reminded myself, because you can lose sight of it. You get so caught up in the weeds and everything that's happening and all the different scenes in the movie that you can forget that at its core, this is a spiritual struggle. And what ultimately is going to change society, whether it's in Australia, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the UK, wherever we're talking about, a society is only as strong as the morality of its people, as the core spiritual strength of its people. And indeed, we're all, I mean, my audience, the people that watch these types of shows, we're already there. We're so far ahead of the curve. Doesn't mean that we're perfect. Doesn't mean that we walk on water, but certainly to be awake, to be pre-awakened, to qualify even for that, I think you had to be chosen by God because of your spiritual grounding, because of your connection. I don't think that anybody, quite frankly, that's awake right now doesn't have some sort of a relationship with God. And ultimately, that's what we're driving at. But you can't just, I mean, you can't expect that, just like everything else, you can tell people this type of stuff all day. It's going to have no effect whatsoever. But if you put people through an intense period of struggles that's so bad that it causes them then to question all of their assumptions, everything that they built their foundation of their life on, that ultimately is going to penetrate straight to the heart. And once we get there, I mean, it's the same problem. I was talking about this on a different show, is like, why are so many people in the West not having kids anymore? Why are the birth rates going down? Why are people choosing not to have families? And all of these things that are essentially aligned with what you were just describing. There's no simple answer. It's definitely a lot of different factors combined. Yes, it has to do with, the economy and money and people being unsure about the future. But ultimately, really what it's about is a sense of narcissism. Like, people are only thinking about themselves. And we need to get back to a place where, I mean, the world wasn't always like that. Certainly our society was not always like that. At one point in time, this is a deeply moral, spiritual society that always had problems, but was nothing like the way our society looks like today. And this is also why, in addition to going through this meat grinder of a series of events is going to bring people to that precipice that Q talks about. This is why I've always stressed over and over again the need for full disclosure. Knowing full well that there may be certain things, it was made very clear to us that the full picture would put 99% of people in the hospital. We don't want that. We don't want to reveal so much that people aren't going to come back from it. But we certainly need the public to know the truth about what's been going on all of these years that they had absolutely no idea about, the people that they idolized and worshiped and still do. They need to know the truth about what they've done to the children, what they've done to all of us, the silent weapons that they've inflicted upon all of us. All of this stuff is part of the Great Awakening, but it's not just so that people can know the truth, but it's that so that truth can then penetrate each and every single person out there. And that ultimately is what's going to transform our society. So, anything you wanted to add to that, or we want to jump to the next stop?
Yeah, let's move on. That's a good wrap up. Thanks. Excellent.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, because this is something that a lot of people have been focusing on let's just say in recent weeks and months, as this operation has continued. And there's been a lot of questioning, a lot of frustration for folks. A major source of that is the lack of public arrests. And certainly I think you and I are both going to be on the same page on this one, as we typically are. But nevertheless, I want to hear you provide your answer for the benefit of the audience. There's been a lot of anger that's been directed at Kash Patel and certainly Pam Bondi for that reason. Now, again, most of us, we all agree that the top tier of the cabal hierarchy already been dealt with behind the scenes. That the military, as I said a little while ago, is engaged in a cleanup operation with the lower tiers. They're basically using the compartmentalization of the cabal as a weapon against these lower tiers, because they don't have any idea who's pulling their strings. They're so compartmentalized. But nevertheless, as the movie continues to play out and preparations are still being made, I would imagine, for transitioning fully into the new system, particularly on the financial front, but we'll leave that alone for the moment. All of this stuff is playing out. And folks understand that, but nevertheless, a lot of people are genuinely upset, and that's putting it mildly, over what they perceive to be a lack of overt action being taken, particularly by the DOJ. And I actually have a clip here that I want to show that I think sums this up. This was the great John Solomon, I think it was just yesterday, talking about Pam Bondi and mirroring a lot of the concerns that folks are having. So let's go ahead and watch this clip, and then I'll say a few more things, and then I'll pass it back over to you. So here we go.
And yesterday, to give you a sense of where our Attorney General is, she did an Epstein Documents 2.0 on all of us. She did it. She put out this tweet, got a lot of traffic, great Fox News story. Oh my God, guess what I discovered? I discovered that Joe Biden gave up Donald Trump's phone and Mike Pence's phone to Jack Smith. That's great, Madam Attorney General, except that story came out in April. She wasn't even aware that wasn't a new development, but an old development that had been discussed by Senators Grassley and Johnson for months. If you want to fix the perp walk problem, if you want to fix the opportunity to bring accountability, Kash Patel has the evidence. The prosecutors, with the exception of Halligan, are lagging far behind the evidence, and that sand clock is ticking down not only on statute of limitations, but on the time that occurs in between elections. 26 elections already underway. We're missing really valuable time to educate the public. The American people are missing valuable time I don't think DOJ is getting there. When you see that there was a 6-month delay in this document, when you see the Attorney General presenting something new that is old, she's so far behind the facts, I'm really worried that Donald Trump doesn't have the team that can bring accountability to the Justice Department. That's just my reporting. And by the way, that's what many Justice Department and members of Congress have been saying to me privately over the last 3 weeks.
Okay, so then you have a general gist there of what he said. So he points out that not only, again, and do I think this is all part of the show? Yes, I do. I'll just kind of lead off with that just so folks know where I'm going with this. But he points out that the same concerns that a lot of people have been expressing online. He's saying that not only is Bondi seemingly behind on all the evidence, having tried to pass off a story that was 6 months old as breaking news, but even more importantly, he puts this into perspective in terms of, to use the metaphor of like the sand in the hourglass diminishing as time marches on toward the 2026 elections. He's basically saying that, we're almost out of runway for, for these high profile perp walks prior to the election that would radically alter the consciousness of the political landscape. And not only that, he also mentioned the statute of limitations for many of these crimes is rapidly approaching. And by the way, it's not only the lack of arrests that's driving the conversation about, or the concern, the conversation about Bondi and Cash. They've also, at least on the surface, they've adopted positions on censoring free speech that are antithetical to our First Amendment, calling for the use of Section 230 to force the social media platforms to crack down on so-called hate speech and conspiracy theories. And of course, all of this was the byproduct of the fallout over the Charlie Kirk situation. So having laid all that out, I'm curious to get your take on this, on Pam Bondi and Kash Patel to a lesser degree, but there's been a lot of questioning, and the way that they're being perceived right now is a topic that is getting a lot of attention. And so I guess the question then becomes, are they playing a role for the White Hats in accordance with this asymmetrical warfare battle plan that we're watching play out? Are they creating these negative optics for a reason? I certainly have my theory, but I'm curious to hear yours.
Okay, yeah. It's okay, as quick as I can. DJT needs the US population as much as possible to be demanding change. Massive change. Bear in mind, there is a continuity of operations system in play. He is a commander-in-chief. Martial law is in play, or state of emergency is in play. Jay has no authority. The Attorney General has no real authority. And what they are doing is they are collapsing the system. The system needs to be collapsed. They can't save the DOJ. Oh, it's fine. No. Change management in consulting world is the toughest gig of all, because most people fear the unknown and the pain that they know. Better the devil you know than you don't know. And the only way to move people is to get them fearing where they are, or being so upset with where they are that they will leap into the future, into the unknown, because it's worse than actually moving. And that fear, change management's tough. And there are elements to change management. There's symbology, there's the celebration of the past, there's the understanding of the need to change, then you change, blah, blah. That's all great if you're talking about a corporation and who's going through a brand change or something. But when you talk about a nation where you have deep roots in things with the DOJ and the FBI and Elliot Ness and all this history, the DOJ has to be collapsed in the minds of the people. The Attorney General's Department has to be collapsed. It's all got to come down. Why? Because it's broken. The system is completely broken. Actually, that's not true. The system is operating exactly as designed to benefit the elites and to squash the people. Now, I'm not talking about the low-level cops, but the system is operating exactly as designed to keep you on a slave planet. And so the system has to be collapsed. Is Pam Bondi an idiot? I don't know. Is she playing to a script? Yes. You don't think Donald Trump can see the frustration? Of course he can. It's there for a purpose. What about Kash Patel? He's reading a script. Have you ever watched a movie where the girl, it's dark, the lights go out, and the girl, the good-looking blonde in the 90s, which you can still see through, but you can't quite, you're frustrated because you can't see more, and your girlfriend's next to you clutching your hand, and she starts walking to the door where there's scratching noises, and the whole audience is going, "What are you doing? Stop it. Don't go through that door. Just walk out the front." But no. She's got to walk to the door where the scratching noise, and she opens it up, and everyone's screaming at this actor, "Don't go through the door." That's exactly where you are now in the US. You should be screaming at Pam Bondi saying, "What the hell are you doing? Kash Patel, where are the results?" The audience has to get to that point where they are demanding something. And for my money, they're playing to a script. The script makes them look like idiots or incompetent or corrupt, or all of them. That's the goal. I heard a question asked by Bill Whittle, who is one of the best political communicators in your country. He asked a question: if to save your country, would you give your life? Yeah, and most men go, "Yeah, I'm there. I'm a man. I'll sacrifice my life." And then he said, "Okay, would you sacrifice your reputation? Would you go to your grave as a traitor and a quisling and a coward? Would you do that? Would you die with the world knowing that you were scum, but in reality, you're a great hero that sacrificed your reputation to save your country?" And most men would stand back and go, "Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. No. That's the sort of tough game being played here, folks. Would you be willing to sacrifice your lies spoken about you for the rest of time, that your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, the only memory they have of you is that you are a piece of scum that should never have been born?" This is how tough war is. Now, when you've got a kinetic war, yeah, okay, sure, that's an interesting sort of way to go. But to willingly sacrifice your own reputation to save your country? Now, I'm just going to speculate here. Is Pam Bondi compromised? Is Kash Patel compromised? Have they taken a deal and they're following the script because somebody's got some pictures of them doing things they shouldn't do? I don't know. I don't care, because I know what I'm watching. I know that they're doing something in order to achieve an objective. To try to second guess why, it's okay. It's fun to speculate, but you're missing the point. Step back and look at the moves and see, okay, I see what's going on. The people are getting increasingly frustrated, and they're getting to boiling point where they're going to say, not boiling point where they're going to squeeze a trigger, but they're saying that's enough. No, we really want it. Now, there's a lot of yelling out there saying, where are the rest? Not enough. We go back to your previous point. What's people still saying? They're accepting as normal, corrupted, slow, delayed justice. We've been doing this for years. You know, somebody gets charged with horrific spate of crime, and it takes 5, 6, 7 years to finally get a result. And then, you know, what happens is the sentence gets commuted, and they spend it. Give me a break. The whole system is operating as designed to screw you and to benefit the elites. The entire system has to be collapsed in the minds, in the minds of the people. That's what we're doing, and that's why that frustration is there. And so the the target audience?
Yeah,
they're not yelling yet. They're not yelling. We are. Come on, get on, please. You know, no.
Yeah, well, I think that's where a lot of the frustration that people feel is that, like, they see people that you go on social media, and to a certain degree, it's kind of like an echo chamber. Most of what you're subjected to is kind of aligned with where you're at, what you're thinking about, right? So they go online and they see Pam Bondi every time she makes a post, or Kash Patel every time they make a post, or Dan Bongino. You look at the comments, and it's basically all the same thing. People are going, where the hell are the Epstein files? Get off of Fox News. Start arresting people, on and on and on, right? And so it creates the perception that people are demanding justice. Like they're slamming on the table and they're saying, we want answers, we want answers. But when you kind of scroll out and you look at the big picture, what percentage of the population is actually at that point, right? And so my theory, quite frankly, is that in the end, this is going to transfer openly into military jurisdiction. And in order for us to get there, they have to tear down each of the pillars. They have to expose the system, kind of like what you were saying, for what it is. The fact that it is built to prevent this type of information from getting out. And that's exactly why it was front loaded. Like Pam Bondi came out and said, oh, we're going to give you all the Epstein files. And then here we are in November, and we still haven't really seen anything substantive, right? That's why they set it up this way. Like, Trump signing an executive order to release all this information so that it would build up that sense of expectation. And then there would be these repeated rug pulls over and over and over. So that it would generate that sentiment. But ultimately what needs to happen is that the three-letter agencies, particularly the DOJ, the FBI, and of course the two individuals we're talking about are the head of those two organizations, have to be exposed. And again, I can say, going back to my earlier point, I anticipated this was going to happen during the Biden years, right? And I think to a certain degree it did. The weaponization of the three-letter agencies, the two-tier justice system, that became very clear. But now we're seeing that pattern continue, which is not something I had anticipated when Kash Patel and Pam Bondi took the reins. I thought it was going to be just the opposite. But that's okay, because the reality is that in order for there to be a justification for an overt military takeover, and to basically say, well, we can't get to, like Juan O'Savin famously says, you can't get to justice in the Justice Department, right? The only way to arrive there is to basically have repeated roadblocks put up. And so that, it kind of justifies whether the necessity of taking it to that next level. And that's what I think is happening. I mean, military is the only way. And I've been saying for a long time now that I don't have any expectation that we're going to see any of these, these high profile individuals be prosecuted in civilian court. I think it's all going to come crashing down. And I think these are all part of the optics for that. And who knows, like you said, is Pam Bondi really a bad person? Is Kash? I mean, my instinct is that they're actually good people, but they're playing a role in order to achieve that objective. And how they're going to script it out, who knows? I mean, the question that you posed about, would you be willing to sacrifice your reputation and have your name go down in history for basically associated with evil for all the wrong reasons in order to save your country? That's a tough one. I don't know. But that would be. It is.
It is. Are you willing to be Judas? Are you willing to be the Judas? Because Christ could never have achieved his objective if someone hadn't gone and told the Pharisees where he was. Now, did Judas do it for 30 pieces of silver? Is that a lie? Is that true? Or did Jesus send him on his way and said, mate, I got a tough job for you. You're going to have to go and tell the bad guys where I am so my future can be fulfilled. I don't know the truth of the name Judas. Imagine naming a child Judas. Oh, goodness me. We just don't know. We just don't know. But here's a question I'd like to ask, and I mean a genuine question, because I've told the Australian people what I think, and it's quite offensive to some, and most look at me and go, you're right. And the question is this: is the US ready to actually take control of its country again? Now, I'm not talking about individual citizens. I'm talking about the population you have. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Time ago, we had a rally in Hyde Park in Sydney. It's a major park. It's beautiful. As soon as we put the rally, the name of the rally, one country, one people, one flag, a real unity sort of thing. We had 800 people turn up. And I just took my hand. We got slightly more than a battalion. Now, for those who weren't paying attention in terms of is Australia ready to take over running this country, literally on that day, at the same time, about, would have been 400 meters to the northeast in the same park, 20,000 people with Palestinian flags were protesting the injustices in the Middle East. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you want evidence that the country, not you are ready to go, the country, is it ready to run itself? And the answer is no, unequivocally no. Even with all the, you can study the Constitution, you can study how to run a strategic plan and how to read a balance sheet and all the things you need to do for the hard measurables of running a county, say. You can do all of that. But if you've got 20,000 people with Palestinian flags turning up and you've got 800 turning up for one people, one country, one flag in Australia, do you think the country's ready? Now, the question for you and your audience, more for your audience, because I know you've already thought about this sort of thing, is the ready to run itself? because once once this goes, once this continuity of operation disappears, guess who you've got in power, in positions of authority? Military, bureaucracy, judiciary. The whole place is rotten, ladies and gentlemen. It is absolutely rotten. And so what's the only way? Military. Are they willing to accept military for an indefinite period? That doesn't mean it just means for an undefined period of time. Are they willing to do it? I don't know. Well, you better be ready, because bet London to a brick, my favorite non-bet, that if DJT just rode off into the sunset, right, we cleaned it up, all over to you now, folks. US would be back exactly where it was 5 years ago. And they wouldn't have Agenda 2030, they have Agenda 40, and you're all going to be dead. Same in Australia. Australia can't do it. I've said it openly to the Australian people, and I don't care if they're offended or not. We are incapable of governing ourselves, and the country is incapable of being run in a moral, sovereign, self-reliant, constitutional republic way. Mm-hmm. That's the hard truth that nobody... I can understand why people don't want to say it, because nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news. I have no problem with that. Through the door always gets a blood nose. No problem. That's easy. I'm the icebreaker. I drive straight into the ice flow and crack it apart so people can follow. That's what I enjoy doing. But the nation's got to be told, you're not ready. The nation's not ready. The country's not ready. All the people are not ready. Individuals, absolutely. Yeah. But we're not ready yet. It'll happen when it happens, guys. When we as a nation are ready. Now, let me just extend that fraction. And this relates to religious tolerance. A lot of the US completely misconstrues what they think religious tolerance. Your history, and most of your readers or listeners will know this, but a lot of Americans don't. A lot of Australians have no clue. When they say the freedom of religion, it had nothing to do with Islam, Hinduism, or anything else, because the internecine fights between various sects were all Christian. So it was the Baptist versus the Protestants versus the Catholic. That was it. You all believed in Jesus Christ, but you had a different approach to your Christianity. That's where they said that maybe we should just tolerate each other instead of trying to kill each other, which they were doing. It never included, never, and was never intended to include a philosophy or a based on killing people like Islam. It was never intended. You're not supposed to love their theology and love the individual, but the theology is broken. It was a warlord. In fact, he never existed, for starters. There's no historical evidence that Muhammad ever existed. Point two, the story about Muhammad is a warlord that kills people. He had 150 followers after his first 12 years, and then he decided to pull out a sword and say, you know what, submit or die. And guess what? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers in the next few years. It's a death cult. It's not a religion. Piss it off. Get rid of them. Get the Muslims out of your country. Now, then the country will start to get ready to govern itself, because a country full of Muslims will end up in an Islamic shithole, and I've lived in them and I know what it's like. So whose job is it to clean up the country? The Muslims. Trump said it. Your job to fix your religion, not ours. And if that means the precedent's been set by setting out a bunch of illegals, and then, you know what, maybe Islam should be categorized a proscribed organization, which we've done in our policies. Islam is a proscribed organization, meaning you can't belong to it, because it is not a religion. It is an invasion theory that they have for the rest of the planet. Now, when people have the stones to actually admit that and say, you know what, I think he's right. Oh, but we've been watching the news for the last 50 years. It says we have to be kind to everybody. Fuck off. Be kind to whom? Guys that marry girls at age 6 and then consummate at age 9 because some fictitious character called Muhammad allegedly did that with Aisha, his favorite wife. That's called pedophilia. We'll fucking hang you. Next, Jews that want to cut the foreskin off their children and have some sick rabbi suck the penis and then give the little boy, apart from distress so profound that the physiological, psychological impact is never recovered from. That is butchery. And then we've got the Aboriginal Australians, just to keep it local. They have manhood ceremonies for the young men, which involves cutting the penis. Now they literally butcher the job so badly that the penis ends up looking like a frankfurt that's been stuck in a microwave too long, if you've ever seen one of those, and it becomes completely dysfunctional, unfunctional. It doesn't work anymore. No. In this country, and this is then, if this is right, then the country's ready to govern itself. This country allows you to bow your head, your soul, and your heart to whomever you like, except Satan. We got a special place for him and his followers. But if you want to pray to, your Jewish God or whatever, fill your boots. But your physical actions must be in accordance with Australian secular law, which is based on a Christian ethic. Fuck off. Because we will never, no country will have that social cohesiveness required to grow and develop unless we have the same set of values, the same morality.
Yep.
So is the United States ready to go? No. Is Australia ready to go? No. France, England, are they ready to govern themselves? No. The populations have to be rebalanced. Sound unpleasant? I don't care.
No, I agree. I totally am in agreement with you. But I would argue as well, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the importance of disclosure, right? We keep talking about the Great Awakening. A big reason in everything that you said about, waking up to the true nature of Islam, 100% agree. But I think at an even deeper level, the reason that people's moral compass is so screwed up is because we've been lied to for our entire lives. And that, I think, is driving so much of the frustration of the people who are awake, who already have accepted the truth. But they're looking at this movie that's playing out, and they're still seeing the deception go on, right? They're still seeing, and we all know it's for good reason. We all understand that. It's like, on the one hand, you can be frustrated by it, but you can also understand the objective behind it. But the only thing that's ultimately going to straighten out everybody's moral compass is when the world is presented with the full truth. Because short of that, we can talk all day long about Islam. We can talk all day long about everything that plagues our society. But as long as the deception continues on a grand scale and an industrial scale, as long as people are still tuning in to the mainstream media and they're hearing the same lies repeated over and over and over again, as long as they can justify keeping their head up of their ass, that's exactly where it's going to stay, right? And that, I think, is what folks are. And it's interesting, and I'm kind of curious to get your perspective on this, because for a long time, as far back as I've been doing podcasts, I've been getting the question and also exploring the question for myself from people saying, well, wait a second. Why not just come? I mean, and I know the answer to this, and I know that most folks out there do, but let's just go back a few years, right? People were saying, well, why not just have the mainstream media start telling the truth? Why not just, skip through all of this deception and just start revealing the truth to people? Because one way or another, there's going to be a massive amount of fallout from that, right? Regardless of if it had been done a few years ago, or if it gets done in, another couple of years. Or I hope it doesn't take that long. But the reality of the matter is, once the truth is revealed, once all this stuff comes out, there's going to be an enormous amount of fallout that we're going to have to deal with. Now, obviously, you could distinguish between one level being like, you want to avoid civil war. You want to avoid people getting violent. You don't want the society to collapse, right? But there is sort of a built-in paradox to the way that this operation is being run, in the sense that the white hats are using deception in order to prepare people to absorb the truth. And there is sort of it is a paradox. You might even make the case that it's it's morally questionable. Like we're approaching this thing using all of these repeated psyops. I mean, it's like people are saying, I wake up every day and it's just like another day, another psyop. And we just keep going through this pattern of deception over and over where nothing is clear. And so I guess where I'm going with this is, in order for us to straighten out, going back to, what we were talking about at the spiritual nature of the war, everybody's spiritual condition hinges upon their understanding of the truth and their ability to align themselves with the truth. That's kind of what morality is all about. And yet we're continuing to scramble everybody's eggs to a point where, and I get it. I understand the need for it because it induces the cognitive dissonance that breaks down people's programming. And ultimately that's what leads them to gravitate toward the truth. At least that's the theory behind it. But there does seem to be sort of an inherent contradiction there. And I'm curious to hear you speak on that.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. There was an operation called Operation Trust in Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution. It wasn't a Russian revolution, ladies and gentlemen. It was the Bolsheviks. 20 million Russians died at the hand of the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks hated the Russians. So just make sure you're clear on the history there. But there was an operation called Operation Trust by the Bolsheviks, which kept telling the white Russians, who were the ruling, those white were the communists, the white were the rulers. And this message kept being fed to the white Russians that, no, trust us, it's okay. There's a lot of support for the white Russians, so everyone stay out. Let us fight our war ourselves. We're okay. The white Russians have got this. And this is what the Bolsheviks were telling the world. But it was all a lie. That's why it's called Operation Trust. It was all a lie, so the Bolsheviks had a free hand to do what they wanted to do. And so anybody with a skerrick of common sense will say, oh, hang on a minute, is this another Operation Trust? Are we being told trust the plan, where the whole plan is to actually stitch us up? And that's a very plausible conclusion to arrive at. It really is. You go, hang on a minute. Now, I don't believe that's the case. I actually believe it's quite okay. The intentions are sound. The point is exactly where I've been for the longest time, and it has never left my mind. And that's this. At what point does the truth come out? Because I'm sure that anybody can justify continuing lying for the next, 2 years, 5 years, 10, 20, 50, 100, 250, 500,000 years, because, the people can't handle it. So, we're just going to have to keep lying to them. And what you end up with exactly what we got now, a cabal of rulers that decided that people are too stupid to govern themselves. Now, right. In part, it's true. We are too stupid. We're too lazy. We're too stupid. Fill in the blank as a result of this terrible decline in the ability of people to live at least a natural life.
But isn't that part of, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Rick, but isn't part of the reason for that, the reason that we've been in such decline, the reason that we're so incapable at the current moment of being able to take the reins and govern ourselves and handle our sovereignty and all of those things, doesn't that sickness in some ways stem from the fact that we've been constantly lied to, and the fact that there's no universal acknowledgement of the truth. And so, to your point, it seems as if in the minds of a lot of folks, and part of what I do is I speak on behalf of my audience, even understanding and maybe having a different perspective, but what I'm hearing, and certainly I've experienced these thoughts as well, which is, and I don't want to use the phrase because a lot of people just say they throw around these phrases like, oh, you're just moving the goalposts or whatever. I don't agree with that in theory, but what I do understand the basic logic of is that people are saying there seems to be always a justification to continue the deception. And then at a certain point, there has to be a transition where we segue out of this movie. We segue out of all of these psyops that they're continually running on us. And we actually are presented with the truth, because to me, that's the only possible remedy to fix society. Right? It seems like, at a certain point in time that this perpetual pattern, and that's what's weighing on people. If you really want to get right down to it, that's what's weighing on people, is just they're sick and tired of being put through psyop after psyop, and then and they go about their lives, they go about their business, and it seems that these psyops aren't having an effect on anybody except themselves. Like the normies are just still being the normies, and people are going, well, is this working? I'm not seeing anybody waking up and all of these things. So, I mean, there is a certain logic to that criticism, right? That at a certain point, there needs to be that hard transition where if we're ever going to recover from this sickness that we've had, this moral, societal, spiritual sickness, that the truth be introduced, and whatever the fallout is, so be it, right? Like speak the truth. And, I forgot who it was who said, like speak the truth. And if the truth shall kill them, let them die. I forgot what philosopher said that, but in essence, at a certain point, you kind of have to get to that place where you just say,
Yeah.
enough is enough of all of this. And we need to move forward with the next phase, which is basically, presenting the truth to everybody and rebuilding society on that proper foundation. Because I don't think that any of our problems are ever going to get fixed, quite frankly, until that happens.
I absolutely agree. And that has been one of my major concerns from the very, very, very beginning. Unless we face the truth and have the opportunity to lift that weight. For those of you who don't do weightlifting, every time you lift a weight, the stresses tear the muscle and stresses the bone. But the more you lift, the stronger the bone gets and the muscles get bigger, right? So if you don't lift the weight, if you're constantly walking around on a Zimmer frame, you'll never be strong. And so to your point, Patriot, you're right on the money. The sickness is going to destroy us. So at what point does the truth come out? Now, Plato in his Republic, and people, if you want to read a hell of a book, read The Republic by Plato. And in there's the idea of the noble lie. And the noble lie, in short, as it's described, and don't take it out of context, but in the book, it describes it as people are basically, it's okay to lie to the people because they're too stupid to look after themselves. So just tell them what they need to get through their miserable, pathetic lives, and the philosopher kings will rule. That's not necessarily Plato's perspective, but that's how it's presented in the story. And the noble lie is what we're living through at the moment. And yes, it's just like a parent talking to a child. No, I'm sorry, there's no more cake left. When there's a cake in the cupboard, but you're not going to give it to your child because they've already had 14 pieces that day. That's not good for them. But people are not children. They are, in a sense, in terms of the reason we're in this bad situation. And so the reveal is actually happening. The hard truth's coming out. It's just not coming out in ways that people like. And it's not covering subjects they like. The foundational truths are coming out. The DOJ's messed up. For example, to our last discussion. Yep. What's the point? We need arrest. No, that's not the point. The point is the DOJ's messed up. The whole system is corrupted. The whole system's got to come down. That's what they're preparing for, not the arrests. Another point to this noble lie thing. People have to die. Now, what do I mean by that? They have to live out their life. Now, the best example I can get historically is when the Hebrews were liberated from slavery out of Egypt and Moses led them away. It took them 40 years to get to the promised land. Now, why 40 years? Is it a 40-year walk, even with children, from Egypt to the promised land? No. What happened in that 40 years? Everybody that, except for a handful, Moses, Jacob, a couple of others, everybody that had experienced slavery was dead. They had lived out their lives, but they had now passed. So the people no longer had this memory of slavery. And so the idea of slavery was anathema to them. What happened when they first left Egypt? They said, it's a bit tough now, This manna from heaven's not cutting it for me. Let's build a golden calf and let's go back to Egypt as slaves. At least we had food and shelter. What had to die? That reliance on an old system that kept them in jail. And this is to your point exactly. I'm agreeing energetically with you, Patriot. That history, that collective history had to die and have a group of people that had suffered in the desert or whatever they did for 40 years. And so everybody was free and they guarded their freedom jealously. And the only ones that remembered that was Moses, as I said, a couple of others. And so this is going to take time. Now, certain truths will come out in the next 2 months. Certain more truths will come out in the next 8 months. 8 months. More truths will come in the next 2 years, then 5 years, then 50. As generations pass, more truths will come out. We, you and me, want it all now. But it has to be phased over, including generational time frames, to allow the people to survive. Imagine telling a Catholic that Jesus wasn't God. Telling a Christian that Jesus was not the Son of God. He is the best of us. He might have been better connected to God. I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying, who's going to listen to that? Nobody. Just like the Muslims will not believe that Muhammad never existed. They're not going to move. See, leadership is leading people. They've got to move. So if you go all the way out here and they haven't moved, that's not leading. As one of my company sergeant majors said, leadership isn't how many you lead, it's how many will follow you. And if they don't follow you, you're not leading. And so there's a time factor here which is difficult for us to handle because we want it now. But some people will need 2 years, 5 years, 10, and some people just will never let go. And so we create a generation or two or three of sovereign, self-reliant Christian individuals that know that they have to govern their countries, and it will take time frames. So now, here's where I still agree with you. Even when we get to this new point, at some point, somebody could logically say, oh, well, you know, let's just keep telling them it's for their own good. No. And that's where we, you, me, and everybody else that we think we're awake, we sit there and say, no, no, no. We want a pathway to where our sovereignty is now real. And it's got to be built into the system. So, no, you can never again say, you're going to have to hand over the reins and risk collapse, because fighting the collapse is what's going to make us strong. And I keep telling Australians, this is going to be untidy. If and when we get to control our counties, and they say, when are we going to govern ourselves again, mate? And I said, well, first of all, we have. We're under the British Crown Corporation, and then we're under the Americans through the British Crown Corporations through the Americans. So we've never done that. Point number one. Point number two, could you run a county now? Well, how many counties do we need to run? All of them. Before they give you a state to run, they're not going to give you until you can run all the counties in the country, you can't run a state. And they continue to run a state, you can't run the federal government. And you can see their eyes rolling back thinking, this is years away. Yes, it is. This is the beauty of an historical perspective on events. See, we've been trained by TV shows with a 23-minute commercial half hour that it's solved. And if you're talking about a movie, it's a bit longer, but it's still the same. No. We are talking generational shifts that have to take place. We, those of us who are awake now, used to have to use this time, and that's what I spent a lot of time within A1. And they are studying hard the mechanics of actually doing this job, of actually being capable of doing it. And the truth will come. The truth has come out. I think 3 years, 23 years ago, what's on the news then and what's on the news now. I mean, in Australia, pedophiles are being revealed 13 to the dozen. It's fantastic. It's finally coming out because it takes time. Oh, no, my favorite cricketer, he was brilliant. Oh, no, he couldn't be a pedophile. Wait for that one to hit the Australian people. That'll terrify them. And a lot of people go, no, can't be. And so eventually you got to think long-term, folks. You can't think like a commercial half hour. The news cannot be communicated in a commercial half hour. Who decided that? You know, going back years, I remember I'd watched, at that stage, we had, 3 commercial stations, and this is when I was a young guy. I think 3 commercials and 1 public broadcaster. And I would watch all of them. I realized very quickly, I thought I was getting a well-rounded information on the day, and I got the same stories 4 times. And I went, that's it, I'm done. It's nonsense. Folks, we have to be ready to demand of those who are running this show. We want a pathway to where we genuinely take control of our destiny. And if that's not in place, I got a massive problem. It's not possible. It's not demanding now. This is childish. We couldn't do it. Not in a million years. But there has to be a pathway for every nation on this planet, a pathway where we can actually try this thing for ourselves. Is it going to be messy? Yes. Are mistakes going to be made? Without doubt. Will we have to go back to martial law to tidy up the mess that the morons made and start again? Maybe, but so be it. This is what's got to happen. This is, man, oh man, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be demanding of our people. And that includes DJT and his team, because don't get me wrong, they're good guys. I got no doubt about their intentions. But down the track, we must demand a pathway, but realistic. Don't say we want to buy, next year, thanks, because you'll be laughed. Like, you really want to buy next year? There you go. And everybody pulls out, and the multinational military force that's actually cleaning up will just leave, and the Masons are back in charge within 2 months because they're the only ones that know how to do anything, because they control everybody, and you're back in hell. And then we have a civil war, because I'm not doing this shit again peacefully. I can tell you that. My wife and I will tool up. And I know how to do it. This is my job. Yeah, I'm trained for this shit. I have no problem. But I'm not doing this again peacefully. I feel like I'm standing there with my hands tied outside the ring, because it's not my job to fight. But God, I want to free myself, jump in and start swinging. So I'm not doing this again peacefully. If this falls over, and it won't, but I'm just letting you know, I'm human. I'm a soldier to my very core. I mean it. And just so you're clear, soldiers aren't diplomatic. Soldiers don't want to lower the temperature in a situation. Soldiers deliver lethal force to end the fucking problem. So when I'm taking a measured approach, you've got to understand this is antithetical to my nature.
Yep. Thankfully,
I can do it, and that's great.
Yep.
But once again, we must demand and entrench every nation on the country, in the planet's got to do it, and they've got to do it on their own. This is not a kumbaya moment, because I can tell you the Islamic countries are going to have a longer journey than us. And Australia, as being one of the few Anglophone countries that's got a chance, Canada's, well, we're all pretty rotten. England's almost done. But we've got a good chance to be one of the first to make that journey. But that's and if you don't like it, suck it up. Mm-hmm. What have you done? I'll put a finger in your face because people like putting a finger in my face. What have you done to help one child? The trafficking, the police in. Oh, I've got an interview coming up in 2 weeks, right? And we got coppers in this particular town, just a little boy from where I live down the road. It's more than down the road, but you get me right. We're coppers in somewhere $20,000 to $100,000 a year, all own 3 and 4 houses worth at least $1 to $2 million each. They are funneling the drugs. They are funneling the child sex trafficking. We've got naval vessels coming into naval bases full of drugs. We've got C-130s flying out of China, sex trafficking children into Townsville in North Queensland. This place is rotten, folks. You think you can control it? You can't control your families. So long story short, before I get too colourful in my language, this has to take time. Old ideas have to die with people because they won't want to shift. We need a new, clean population ready for a new experience, and we have to demand a pathway to the future on a national level. As I said, Islamists will take time. I'm planning on making sure Australia, whether I'm in charge or not, or whether I have a say or not, I'm going to continue this war. I'm not going anywhere. But we need to have that pathway to the future and example to the rest of the planet what is required to do this properly. And the US, I'm sorry, but you're not ready either. You've got to clean up your country. You've got a lot of shit in there that's got to go. And you'll find a lawful way to do it. That's why EDT is running this. It's all lawful. But you are no more capable of doing it than many other countries, absent military intervention. Anyway, so there you go. I'm right with you there, mate. The truth will sanitize the world, and then we can start to live the way that is best for us.
Yeah. No, I agree, and believe me, I understand the point you were making about the noble lie in Plato's Republic. I remember having read that when I was in college, and I've actually thought about that a lot. You know, that's in certain ways that's the way that this. The way that the sort of philosophy of how this is playing out is aligned with that. Like we need to use optics and deception, and we need to create an illusion for folks so that they can gradually get to a point where they start asking questions on their own, it's almost like it's creating the illusion that people are coming to an organic awakening of their own. But in order to do that, the inherent contradiction in that, the paradox is that you need to use the deception in order to get people to seek out the truth. That, you know, it makes a lot of sense. And I certainly understand when you talked about it being a generational process, right? I don't have the expectation. I mean, yeah, do I want it all now? Sure, I do. Absolutely. But I don't have the expectation that at any point there's going to be just this boom moment where all of a sudden all the floodgates open and everything is just dumped out into the public all at once. I never had that expectation, but there is, at least in my point of view, there has to be a point where a series of events that are rooted in the truth actually are exposed to the world that will cause that holy shit moment for all the normies out there. And short of that, there's probably it seems to me like it's just going to be a repetitive cycle for folks where they're just, you know, they're so used to the deception, and especially now. I mean, even people inside of our community, we've gotten conditioned over several years of going through repetitive psyops that, it's almost like you get trained in a way to expect that this is just going to continue coming, on and on and on perpetually. Now, I certainly can acknowledge that, yes, indeed, if we look back a couple of years ago to the things that they were talking about on mainstream media, it was a hell of a lot different than what they're talking about now. I mean, certainly talking about child trafficking, talking about pedophilia, talking about, openly talking about election fraud, openly talking about all of the issues that we want to come out. The conversation is out there. So don't get me wrong. Indeed, it is. And I agree with you. Fundamentally, the reality is that we all want this operation to be successful. That's the most important thing, right? At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. But there has to come a point where enough truth is revealed to the public that can actually cause that shift. That's what we're waiting for. It's like, that's what I want to see. I want to wake up in a world where, for once, all the normies are going, holy shit, what's going on? And we're not the ones going, holy shit, what's going on? Right. Like to the point where, like we finally can, we finally can see that we've crossed over into that new ground. We've broken that new ground where people are being forced to face reality. And that's, I think, where it comes, that's where that deep rooted frustration comes from, is that folks feel like it's been such a long time, and yet the normies still aren't being forced to accept that reality. And I guess in a sense, as part of it connects perfectly with what we were talking about with Mamdani and probably what's in store for New York over the next several months. They're going to get a dose of that reality. But beyond that, in terms of the deep, dark stuff, let's just even, stopping short of the satanic ritual abuse, exposing, the real plot behind COVID, the depopulation agenda, the attempt at basically, killing us all off. The fact that our elections, I mean, you talked about this as well, the fact that our elections have been rigged for like ever, right? This has been going on for, before we were even alive. They've been rigging elections, and yes, indeed, just like Hugh told us, crimes against children unite across all party lines. That those things need to come out, because those are the things that are going to force the normies. At a certain point, you kind of have to take the kid gloves off, and you have to say, look, it's time for you guys to face maybe not everything all at once, but enough of that reality to the point where it's actually going to bring the world to a standstill. And then people are going to finally start realizing all the things that we've known for such a long time. And then gradually we can rebuild upon that foundation. But until we stop treating the public like children, they're going to continue to act like children. To your point, people aren't ready. They're not prepared. They're not in a position to take the reins. But again, I go back to my counterpoint, which is not in disagreement with you, but ultimately that they won't ever be, unless they're forced to face the truth, unless they're forced to face reality. That's why we have such a deep psychological, I mean, we have a mental health crisis that's just beyond words at this point. And what causes that, what perpetuates that, it's just like anything else. If you enable a sick person, whether it's somebody who's mentally ill, or let's just take addiction and use that for an example. Like if you know somebody's addicted, and if you enable that behavior to continue, then that, without that hard intervention that forces them to then face the reality of their life, of their own actions, they're going to continue that same sick behavior. So I guess that's really what it is. It's like that intervention is, I think, what everybody is so clamoring for. Not so much, the revelations of everything that we know, because again, it took us years to learn all the things that we know and build the foundation that we have of all of this knowledge. I don't think that's necessarily what's driving a lot of the discontent. It's just that, people are sick and tired of the normies not being forced to face reality, because forcing them to face reality one way or another, Rick, just as well as I do, We're not getting out of this. It's not going to be a smooth ride. Like there's no easy way, and people are putting in the comments, like, it's like you see it all the time, rip off the damn Band-Aid. Like at a certain point, we have to stop treating the normies like children. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to act like children. And the crisis, the mental health crisis and all of that sickness is just going to get worse. So, I mean, I think that's essentially the point I wanted to make on it.
Yeah, and I agree with you entirely. There's no point of disagreement between us at all. In fact, what might give you, and not give you, but give the listeners some, not peace, but at least something to think about. Let's go back to the landscape when I kicked off and I said, what's coming up? We've got New Year, everything's new and fresh. And we've got the 4th of July, 2026. So imagine they spend 6 months ripping off Band-Aids and everybody is cutting their wrists, driving off cliffs because they're so depressed with the news. Is that a smart strategy? Is anybody going to want to celebrate? No, it's a rhetorical question. What that means is, if there's 4 July and here's 1 Jan, and we've got a little bit of time before January, so it wouldn't be surprising if stuff started accelerating, and then Q1 next year, enough Band-Aids, not all the Band-Aids, enough Band-Aids come off to really get the result that we're talking about. That truth, that light that sanitizes and allows. Because you can't go straight into a celebration with everybody tearing their party dresses. And so what's got to follow the revelation? What's got to follow the revelation to put everybody in a party mood? So you've got this phase where the Band-Aid's off. What's got to happen here? Or, I don't know, arrests, executions, retribution, evidence that we are in charge, we the people, evidence that we've got something to celebrate. They have to give them something to celebrate here, which is following something miserable there. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So if you're looking for those tectonic...
Yeah. How about the reset of the financial system, where people have an entirely new, perspective on their financial situation?
Yeah.
Or how about, the release of hidden technologies that could radically transform people's lives, things along those lines? That would probably go a long way.
There you go. And this is now we're focusing on what's going to happen in the next 8 months, right? Or 7.5 months. We know that. And so they have to be in a party mood. They've got to have something to celebrate, something real. And as you said, so a financial collapse where you look at your bank balance and it's zeroed, and your housing portfolio is now worth 1/10 of what it was, blah, 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 all this misery. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow. So pain, tension, release. Pain, tension, release. This release has to be so joyous, so real substantive truth in terms of the pain, but then substantive evidence of here's the arrest, here's all the good stuff that's been held back for decades or centuries. Right. And so we are genuinely in a party mood come 4 July, and the US and DJT knows how to run this. He doesn't need the white hats or anybody else how to do this. He knows how to build it up and go, this is the day you are going to remember. This is the 4th of July that the US will remember for the next 250 years. And so, yes, pain and then relief.
Amen. Amen. Let it be true. No, absolutely. And, and one other point to make on that front is that, I don't think anybody out there, when we say rip off the Band-Aid, it's like, to go back to to the metaphor that I was using about addiction, right? So you have an intervention with somebody, you sit them down and you say, this can't continue. You have to face reality. You have a problem, right? You don't just have an intervention and then leave them to their own devices. You take them and you put them into a rehab. You rehabilitate them in a sense. I mean, so that's part of the process. And I've always made the case that all of us who are awake, who are what I like to call pre-awakened, if you will, are going to be tasked with that primarily in our own localities, like with all the people that we know, all the people that are around us. It's been said in a lot of different ways, but, find your local anon, because you're going to need that person as we go through this, so that's the way I see it. It's like, it's not so much that, we want to shock people to the core, and we don't want people killing themselves and driving off bridges. Of course not. Right. And that's why I think there's got to be a limit in terms of how much is revealed and how quickly. I've always understood that, because we don't want it to be counterproductive. We don't want it to backfire. But at the same time, there needs to be a point where we finally put our foot down and say, this is reality. This is what you need to face. And we'll guide you through the process. Oh, and by the way, here's a nice little goodie bag to help you out along the way, right? With all these things that are suddenly going to, radically transform people's perspective. I think even just hidden health modalities, suppressed patents, Q told us, what if the cures already exist? There's no such thing as there's no such thing as a question in the Q drops. When Q puts a question mark, he's telling you, right? The stuff already exists. It's already out there. So that alone, I think, would be enough. How many people out there are suffering pretty much? Well, we actually know now, thanks to RFK. What is it? I think it's 76%. Is it 76? I think it's, I remember now, because he said it's 76.4. And of course, if you add those up, you get a 17. He says 76.4 Americans are suffering from at least one chronic disease. At least one. And most people have several comorbidities. So that means that 3 out of every 4 people walking around have a chronic disease. So if you suddenly release these health technologies that can cure people, that in and of itself, I think would help bridge the gap, right? Would help people absorb the shock. And then they would say, oh my God, these horrible things that all of these people that have done that we worship, and it's so terrible. But, the flip side to that coin is those horrible people and all the horrible things they did. The good news is they didn't succeed. The military stepped in. Oh, and by the way, we're going to give you all the things that they were hiding from you that are going to radically transform your life and your children's life and their children's life. So I think that's ultimately where we're headed. And I pray to God that, the timeline that you're talking about is on point, because, it makes a lot of sense. 250-year anniversary of the country. We've all seen the little archway that was on Trump's desk. We know what an arch typically represents, right? Victory. So I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, right? Is that this is the pathway forward. It's going to get really ugly. We're kind of circling back to where we began, which is perfect. It's going to get really ugly in the not too distant future. But hopefully we all pray that by next summer, we'll be looking at a very, very different situation. So this has been fantastic, Rick. We're coming up on a couple of hours here. There were a couple other topics. As usual, we get into a conversation. We just kind of start vibing with each other, and I just go with the flow. But there were certainly other questions that I had about Israel, about Venezuela, and so forth. But I suppose, can save those for another day. So why don't you just kind of give us sort of a sense of what you think the audience should. I think you've kind of done that to a certain degree throughout the course of the video, but you're so great at summing things up and succinctly into a nice little package for folks. So, moving forward, as we go through this, looking at the next 8 months, as we look toward the summer, and but of course we have to live each and every day, and we're going to experience an awful lot of turbulence. What do you think the best way for folks out there to approach that is, given all the things that we've talked about tonight, the sense of frustration, the sense of fatigue, all of the things that folks out there are struggling with, and by the way, I just want to underscore this point. Just because people are expressing these things doesn't mean that they're blackpilling. It doesn't mean that they don't trust the plan. It just means that they're human. Just like Rick said, there's parts of all of us. We have emotions, and, from time to time, questions come up, and I think it's healthy to explore those questions. But having said all that, what do you think is the best way for folks to stay grounded and focused as we go through what sounds like it's going to be the eye of the storm in the not too distant future?
What I'd like to do, with your indulgence, is play an excerpt from my last green room where I spoke about Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, and his book Meditations. And just really briefly, because the best thing every one of us can do, apply the fundamental precepts of Stoicism. The Stoics was the Stoicism was a philosophy, a Greek-Roman philosophy. Short version is that men do not rule circumstances, but we can rule how we respond to those circumstances, to control our emotions, our reasons, and to accept that some things are beyond our control, but those things within our control we should endeavor to, we should do well. So with your indulgence, I'll just do a quick intro to who Marcus Aurelius is for those who don't know. And then I'm going to play, it's only about 5 minutes, and it's a series of his observations. Now, Meditations wasn't a book he wrote as a book. What he did was, at the end of each day, he would make a note. He would just in his journal, but not a journal like the temperature was and things like that. But this was acute observations for his own personal development, what he noticed in the day to help him develop into a better man. And if we, each one of us, literally forget Bondi and Cash Patel one side, and prepare yourself for the storm that's coming. Because the storm, if it's not in you, it'll certainly be outside you. So you need to be that one that is solid, that is clear-minded, that is unaffected by the noise. And this is something that I think everybody needs to do. So if you just bear with me for a second, sure. I'm going to very briefly, I'm just going to open this presentation. I'm going to share screen again.
Okay.
Because it is very important. I'll just get rid of those. You don't need to see that. So I'm just mucking around the presentation. So just bear with me for a second.
Sure.
It is absolutely worth it. These are words of wisdom from, he was known as the last good emperor, the last 5 emperors, the good emperors. After that, Roman emperors took a bad nosedive. Anyway, so I'm going to, first I'm going to read an introduction to an 1887 edition of translation by Jeremy Collier of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And you can get this online, folks, so just get it, read it, and you don't read it like a book. You read one paragraph, and then you ponder it. Anyway, here's the introduction. Until philosophers are kings, and the princes of this world have the spirit and power of philosophy, and political greatness and wisdom meet in one, cities will never cease from ill, nor the human race, as I believe, and then only will our state have a possibility of life and see the light of day. The truth is that the state in which the rulers are most reluctant to govern is best and most quietly governed, and the state in which they are most willingly is the worst. Thus writes Plato in his Republic, laying down the conditions which even to him appear impossible, under which a state may be wisely governed. The ruler must be a philosopher as well as a king, and he must govern unwillingly, because he loves philosophy better than dominion. Once in the history of this world, these conditions were fulfilled in Marcus Aurelius. In Marcus Aurelius, we find the philosopher king, the ruler who preferred the solitude of the student to the splendor of the palace, the soldier who loved the arts of peace better than the glory of war. And so this is one of history's greatest exemplars. And the reason I mention this is because each of us, the truth is, must all, every one of us, to whatever extent is possible, become our own philosopher kings and queens. If we are sovereign, if we are the source of law, then that's what we must become. And imagine if we were an entire nation of such men and women and children. So there you go. So now I'm going to share screen, and I'm going to play a series of his observations, and you'll get a feel of the of this book, which every student should study, read, study, and learn. It's just extraordinary. So just here we go. And it's got some nice music to go with it, so everyone can sit back and relax and
be a great way to end
enjoy.
the show. And I love what he had to say about the reluctance. You know, the reluctance to lead is what ultimately makes a good leader. And in a certain way, it kind of reminds me of a lot of the Anons, right? Like, you know, not that we're leaders in the great sense of the word, but, you know, the fact that none of us really had any desire or ambition. I certainly didn't, you know, to start a podcast, to put my voice out there. Never imagined that people would listen. Never imagined that it would be helpful to people. along those lines. I think that it's part of the reason why this movement has been so effective, is because ultimately the people that are leading the charge are folks like just ordinary people who never really sought attention, who never really sought glory or fame or any of those things, but it was ultimately a moral prompting. It was a divine energy that brought us forward to do this type of work, even despite, whatever, reservations or reluctance that we had to do it. And I think that's part of the reason why it's been just such an amazing historical movement by we the people. So just thought I would add that. So okay, let me bring up the screen here and let's watch.
Let me know when it's up.
Good to go. Good to go.
Okay, Imperator Kaiser Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus. He was 58 when he died, ladies and gentlemen. One of the greatest emperors of Rome. So if you're a bit older than that, get your skates on, because we got work to do. So here we go.
I love that. I
Okay,
love that.
there we go.
What a
We're
great way.
back. Now, let me just finish. Oh, yeah, look, and to your question quite specifically, how can we best prepare ourselves? Buy Meditations, read it. And as I said, it's not a book to read cover to cover. You read a line and you ponder it and work it. And you do that enough. Now, why do I say that? One, because it's good for you. And it particularly applies to those of us who have had, how can I say this, inadequate parenting. You know, an absent or a detached or a unavailable father and mother, emotionally, physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and spiritually absent. And what I do and what I spent my life doing is reaching out to, I had great parents, don't get me wrong, but nobody's perfect. And so I reached out to characters like Marcus Aurelius, historical figures, towering heroic characters in fiction as exemplars of what I should become. And so those there, and this is one of the biggest problems on the planet. We've got bad parents that don't know how to raise children because they weren't raised well. So please get this book, read it, and become that heroic character that you wished you had in your life to guide you, to show you, to teach you. And this applies to men and women. So just take that book and you can find your father everywhere. Now, the best father, of course, is the Almighty, but it's a bit more relatable to speak to a human, if that makes sense. And so, you know, Christ is one, and then people like Marcus Aurelius are others. So this book is just brilliant. Get it, read it, don't have to pay for it. It's online for free. Ponder it, get yourself ready, and be prepared to be that philosopher king or queen that's going to be leading the entire planet into the next century or two.
Brilliant. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I've always been drawn to philosophy. And I think in a lot of ways, that's how I lead with that in terms of how I analyze everything. And oftentimes I find that I get caught up. I mean, like you said, we're all human, right? Nobody's perfect. And there are times where I get caught up in the complexity of everything, you know, but taking a step back and remembering ultimately what it is that we're fighting for. And perhaps even more importantly, what our role is in this fight, in this war, you know, why we were awakened to begin with, to meditate on that, to think about, you know, of all the people that are walking around. And sure, our ranks are swelling. There are more and more people who are waking up, but it's a very, very small fraction of people who are chosen for this, who are given the ability to have their eyes open and to be able to absorb and accept the realities that most of humanity is, quite frankly, not even, I mean, I'd like to think we're getting closer to them being ready, but they're not even remotely ready to absorb the things and accept the things that we know. And yet somehow, some way, despite all of our flaws, despite every mistake that we've ever made, and despite questioning if we're even worthy to be put in this position, because I often ask myself that question as well. Like, you know, I mean, I'm my own biggest critic. You know, why was I chosen to do this? Why was I given a platform and so forth? But, you know, God knows the hearts of his warriors. And that's why he was he was directly involved, I believe, to my core in choosing each and every one of us to play a role in this epic drama. This is the most incredible moment in all of human history. One could argue this awakening, this period of time that we're going through. So spending time, people often say, go within, go within. What does that really mean? Well, Rick just gave you a perfect example of where to start, to bring you back, to drown out all the noise and to really get you to focus and even meditate on, what ultimately brought you here, what's kept you here, the reason that you were chosen, and your responsibilities moving forward. And in order to rise up and meet the demands of those responsibilities, what you need to focus on for yourself and what you need to pray for that spiritual guidance. I mean, every single day I ask God to lead, guide, and direct me. And that's, I think, probably the most important prayer that I say every day. Just show me the way, show me the path. I know I'm not going to get it right 100% of the time. I mean, heck, I'm lucky if I get it right 50% of the time, but I still try, every single day we continue this journey. So Rick, this has been an incredible conversation. As always, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And certainly I hope everybody out there in the audience enjoyed it. Make sure that like Rick is doing right now, you hit that thumbs up if you did. Let us know in the comments. Certainly, I thank everybody out there. We had a nice audience for the live stream. At one point, we had about 2,000 viewers between Rumble and X. So the people who showed up tonight, and I know there's a lot of other shows. Thank you for being here and choosing to watch Rick and I. And for everybody out there who's going to watch the replay, let us know what you thought in the comments. And just absorb all of this incredible wisdom that Rick has shared with us tonight. So thanks again. We're going to have to do this a little bit more often. I know sometimes a few months go by before we get back together again, but it's always one of my favorite conversations. So thank you so much. Anything else you want to say, Rick, before we sign off?
No, absolutely not. That's been a great pleasure and privilege, Patrick. Thank you for inviting me. You call, I'll answer. This is always surprising and wonderful interviews. So anytime, mate, anytime at all.
All right, man. I love you, brother. At some point in time, we're going to have to, like you say, we're going to have a lemonade when you come over to the States, right? So I'm looking forward to that day. Looking forward to that day. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back on, who knows, maybe over the weekend. I keep trying to carve out some time to do a solo show. It's been like forever, but in any event, I will be back with you folks on Monday with Mike King. But until then, God bless and Godspeed, everybody. Patriot out.